Jim Jordan strutted into the hearing certain he'd control the narrative. Cameras swung toward him. Staffers leaned in. This was his arena. But he never expected what came next, because across the table sat Jasmine Crockett, quiet at first, watching. The crowd treated Jordan like the heavyweight, the veteran. Yet in one breath, Crockett shattered that illusion, exposing a legal blind spot so obvious the entire room froze. What she said left Jordan speechless. And you'll want to hear every word. Like and subscribe, and tell me, where are you watching from? The committee chamber pulsed with the kind of tension only high-stakes hearings produce. Photographers jostled for angles, reporters kept pens pressed against paper, and aides whispered like stagehands behind a curtain. At the center of it all sat Jim Jordan, leaning forward, sleeves rolled, his reputation carrying him before he even opened his mouth. This was his brand, bulldozing through hearings, asking rapid-fire questions, twisting legal phrasing into political theater. For years, Jordan had thrived on making colleagues stumble. The crowd expected more of the same. Jordan sharp, Jordan dominant, Jordan untouchable. Across the table, Jasmine Crockett sat in stark contrast. Calm, steady. Her eyes scanned her notes without urgency, every movement deliberate. She wasn't competing for volume. She wasn't trying to match his theatrics. Instead, she looked like someone quietly studying a chessboard, already seeing 10 moves ahead. The topic seemed tailor-made for Jordan's aggression. Constitutional oversight and jurisdictional authority. Complex, dry, perfect for grandstanding. He launched into it with his trademark swagger, voice rising, hands slicing the air as if each gesture sealed his argument. To spectators, it looked decisive. To Crockett, it looked sloppy. Because Crockett wasn't just another member on the dais. She was a seasoned attorney. Legal nuance wasn't background noise to her. It was her fluency. While Jordan delivered what he thought were knockout lines, Crockett was hearing every misstep, every overreach, every moment where bravado outweighed fact. She didn't move yet. Timing was everything. Jordan's voice grew louder. Reporters scribbled "Jordan leads hearing," and even a few colleagues leaned back as if the outcome was already set. It was the perfect illusion of control, and it was exactly what Crockett needed, because the silence she held wasn't weakness. It was patience. And when she finally spoke, the silence would belong to Jordan. Jordan thought his opening salvo had landed. He leaned in, ready to steamroll the room. But what he didn't see, what no one saw, was that Crockett was about to turn his own words into the rope that bound him. Jordan's voice cut through the chamber, sharp and insistent. He rattled off a sweeping claim, insisting that oversight authority gave him the right to press witnesses well beyond legal boundaries. His phrasing was deliberate, fast, confident, and delivered with the cadence of someone used to winning arguments through sheer force of will. The crowd reacted the way they always did, murmurs from his allies, tight jaws from his opponents, and quick scribbles from the press corps. This was the Jordan playbook. Overwhelm, dominate, declare victory. But then came the pause. Crockett finally looked up from her notes, her expression cool, almost surgical. She didn't match his volume. She didn't even raise her voice. Instead, she asked one question, her words precise and deceptively simple. "Chairman Jordan, could you cite the statute that gives you that authority?" The room shifted instantly. What sounded like a casual inquiry to the untrained ear landed like a blade to those who understood the stakes. She hadn't argued with him. She hadn't raised a counterclaim. She had forced him to stand on legal ground, ground he had just assumed but never secured. Jordan blinked. His rhythm stuttered for the briefest moment. He tried to recover, repeating his original point louder, leaning on volume instead of law. But Crockett's question hung in the air, unanswered, and everyone knew it. The pivot had arrived. Jordan's performance was no longer about dominance. It was about defending his own credibility. And the more he spoke without answering, the thinner that credibility looked. Reporters glanced at each other, sensing the turn. Staffers leaned forward, their pens hovering. Crockett didn't interrupt, didn't press. She simply waited, letting the silence expose what Jordan couldn't fill. For the first time in that hearing, the spotlight wasn't on Jordan's swagger. It was on his silence, and Crockett wasn't finished. The silence after Crockett's question wasn't just awkward, it was dangerous. Because when she finally leaned forward, she wasn't empty-handed. She had receipts, and the room was about to fracture. Jordan tried to mask the hesitation with his trademark bluster. He leaned in harder, speaking louder, repeating the same phrases he had used minutes earlier, as though volume could cover the gap in his knowledge. His allies nodded, but the rhythm was off now, and everyone could feel it. That's when Crockett moved. Calmly, deliberately, she reached for a folder in front of her. It wasn't thick, it wasn't flashy, but when she pulled out a single printed page and held it up, the room stilled. "This," she began, her voice clear but even, "is from the committee's own briefing memo last session. Chairman Jordan, you signed off on this summary yourself, and yet right here," she tapped the page with her index finger, "it acknowledges that the statute you just claimed doesn't exist in the way you described it." The impact was immediate. Reporters' heads snapped up. Staffers turned toward one another. A low ripple moved across the back benches as whispers spread. Jordan froze for a second, the paper in her hand reflecting back not just her preparation, but his contradiction. Crockett wasn't grandstanding. She wasn't shouting. She was simply holding up Jordan's own words, his own approval, his own oversight. It was quiet, devastating precision. Jordan fumbled for a response, trying to dismiss the document as taken out of context. But the damage was done. The crowd knew it. The cameras knew it. And worst of all for Jordan, he knew it. For the first time, he wasn't the one dictating the tempo. Crockett was. Each second he failed to reconcile the document with his claim, the stronger her position grew. The shift was palpable. A committee that had entered assuming Jordan's dominance now leaned in to hear Crockett's next line. It wasn't just about legal nuance anymore. It was about credibility, and Crockett had just cracked his wide open. By now, Jordan wasn't leading the hearing. He was chasing it. And when he tried to wrestle the moment back, Crockett didn't just hold her ground. She dismantled him in real time. Piece by piece, the tension had broken open. What started as a structured hearing now felt like a live duel. Jordan leaned forward, red-faced, voice climbing. He accused Crockett of mischaracterizing the memo, of playing political games. The louder he got, the clearer it became that he was fighting to regain control rather than directing the discussion. Crockett, by contrast, didn't flinch. She didn't meet his volume. Instead, she leaned back, voice steady, eyes locked on him, with the calm of someone who already knew where the exchange would end. "Mr. Chairman," she said evenly, "this isn't politics. It's your own signature on your own summary. You can shout all you want, but the statute doesn't change." Gasps rippled through the room. Some aides tried and failed to suppress smiles. The audience knew the line had landed. Jordan had walked into the trap, and Crockett had sprung it with surgical timing. The moderator attempted to interject, urging order, but the chamber had already slipped its script. This was no longer the predictable back-and-forth Jordan thrived on. He was unraveling, trying to drown Crockett's precision with noise. But the contrast was stark. His voice, frantic. Hers, controlled. At one point, he jabbed his finger toward the paper she held, insisting she was ignoring the real issue. Crockett didn't even blink. She set the memo flat on the desk, slid it forward slightly, and responded with a single remark that cut deeper than any argument. "If the real issue is the law, then perhaps you should read it." The chamber erupted. Reporters' pens flew. Staffers' jaws dropped. The moderator's gavel pounded for order, but it was already too late. The electricity had shifted, and everyone felt it. For years, Jordan had used sheer force to dominate hearings, but in this moment, Crockett showed the one weapon he couldn't match: calm, unshakable command of the law itself. And that one remark didn't just silence him. It set the stage for the line that would define the entire hearing. The room had already tilted toward Crockett. But then came the moment. One line, so sharp, so undeniable that it didn't just silence Jordan. It rewrote the narrative in real time. The chamber was still buzzing from Crockett's last remark when Jordan tried one last tactic. He leaned forward, almost pleading with volume, insisting that he knew the law, that his interpretation was the one that mattered. It was the performance he had given 100 times before. Overwhelming, relentless, meant to bury doubt beneath a pile of sound. But Crockett had been waiting. Her tone didn't shift, her cadence didn't rise. Instead, she spoke with the kind of clarity that slices through chaos. Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, you can't keep confusing political theater with actual law, and if you walked into my courtroom with this argument, you'd be laughed out in 5 minutes. The air seemed to vanish. For a beat, there was nothing. No shuffling, no side talk, no scribbling, just stunned silence. Then, like a wave, the reaction broke. Gasps, muffled laughter, the unmistakable crackle of a room realizing it had just witnessed a turning point. Cameras zoomed in instantly. Reporters underlined the phrase in their notes, some mouthing the words as if rehearsing their lady. The moment was too sharp, too cutting, too perfect not to spread beyond the four walls of that hearing. Jordan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. The very premise of his dominance, his command of the room, had been punctured. And Crockett hadn't done it with theatrics. She'd done it with the authority of someone who actually knew the law. Within minutes, clips of the exchange began circulating online. The quote raced across timelines, hashtags forming before the hearing even adjourned. Commentators didn't have to frame it. Crockett's words carried their own weight. For Jordan, it was the kind of silence he'd never lived down. For Crockett, it was the moment she stamped her authority not just on the hearing, but on the national stage. The room was hers now, and the country was starting to notice. Inside the chamber, Crockett had silenced Jordan, but outside those walls, the ripple turned into a wave. Headlines, pundits, and damage control. The fallout was just beginning. It didn't take long. By the time the committee adjourned, the clip had already made its way across social media. The line, "You'd be laughed out in 5 minutes," spread with the speed of wildfire. Commentators clipped it, spliced it, looped it. Hashtags carrying Crockett's name shot upward, trending across platforms before the official transcript was even released. Cable networks jumped in almost instantly. Some replayed the exchange in slow motion, breaking down the legal nuance for viewers. Others leaned into the spectacle, airing split-screen coverage of Jordan on one side, frozen mid-expression, and Crockett on the other, calm and unshaken. It wasn't just a moment. It was a turning point in how both lawmakers were being perceived. Jordan's allies scrambled. Spokespeople rushed to spin the narrative, claiming Crockett had been disrespectful and out of line. They pushed press releases emphasizing Jordan's long-standing record, hoping to reframe the story before it solidified. But the effort fell flat. Every attempt at damage control was overshadowed by the starkness of the clip. No spin could erase the silence that followed Crockett's one-liner. Meanwhile, Crockett was approached by reporters outside the chamber, microphones clustered, cameras pressed forward. Asked if she wanted to clarify or soften her words, she didn't hesitate. "No," she said, "if you're going to lead with the law, you should know the law. That's not disrespect. That's accountability." Her response doubled down on the very point she had made in the hearing, that Jordan's style was theater, not substance. And doubling down only strengthened her position. Commentators across the spectrum weighed in. Legal analysts noted how rare it was for someone to directly confront Jordan on his weakest ground, his legal foundation, instead of his volume. Political analysts pointed out how Crockett's calm demeanor amplified the impact. She hadn't humiliated him with theatrics. She had dismantled him with expertise. What had started as just another hearing had become a national conversation about credibility, law, and the dangers of mistaking performance for authority. And while Jordan scrambled to recover, Crockett's voice carried further than it ever had before. The hearing might have ended, but the story was only getting bigger. By now, the headlines had been written, the clips had gone viral. But Crockett wasn't finished. She left the room with one final line, not aimed at Jordan, but at everyone watching. As the hearing wound down, the energy in the chamber was unmistakably different from when it began. Hours earlier, Jim Jordan had walked in certain of control, confident that his voice would dominate. Now he sat subdued, his momentum gone, his confidence punctured by a single exchange that would follow him long after the gavel fell. Crockett gathered her notes without theatrics, standing with the same calm she had carried all day. Reporters shouted questions, some asking if she felt she had gone too far, others eager for a soundbite to close out their coverage. She paused only once, turning back just enough to let her final words settle over the room. The law isn't a stage, it's a standard, and if you can't meet it, you don't belong leading it. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't delivered for applause, but it carried through the chamber, through the microphones, and eventually across the country. That line, more than any rebuttal or headline, became the echo of the hearing. Pundits repeated it, activists quoted it, and viewers shared it with captions that needed no explanation. For Jordan, it was a silence he couldn't escape. For Crockett, it was a moment that cemented her as more than just a participant. She had become the one voice that cut through the noise. And for everyone watching, it raised a question bigger than the clash itself. When leadership is tested, do we reward volume or do we reward truth? The camera zoomed out, catching the chamber in wide shot. The noise returned, paper shuffling, chairs scraping, but the weight of Crockett's words lingered. This wasn't just a hearing anymore. It was a warning. Would you trust a leader who can't answer the law they claim to enforce? Like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from?